Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much to Barry for that very generous introduction. Thank you very much for the Root Group for asking me along, Robert Holes. I'm very proud to be here among such distinguished company. When I came in this morning, Graham Eardley said to me, well, I hope you're going to inspire us all. And I said, well, I'm probably going to depress you all, actually. But there is an uplifting, positive message at the end of what I'm going to say, so please bear with me. Now, the title of today's conference is Deal or No Deal. But the whole idea of a deal is built on a false premise. There is no such thing as this mythical deal that's been talked about incessantly since the referendum result. Now, any deal that's good for the EU is going to be bad for Britain. And any deal that is good for Britain is going to be unacceptable to Brussels. Now, negotiations are always about trying to find a win-win position. But Brussels has no win position if Britain leaves. And this isn't about economics or the practicalities of border control or anything else. It's about the politics of ever closer integration. The central guiding principle of the European Union has always been ever closer union. The integration of politics, economics, finance, the military, and anything else you can think of in order to build a centralised political state, a United States of Europe in reality, if not actually in name. The European Union has no incentive whatsoever to negotiate a good deal with the UK. It simply doesn't want us to leave. It doesn't want to lose our massive contributions to the EU budget. As Julian's rightly pointed out, we're always the second largest contributor, or sometimes the third, depending on how the French jiggle the figures. It doesn't want to lose that massive amount of money. It doesn't want to lose control of our international trade policy. It doesn't want to lose control of our agricultural policy and markets. It doesn't want to lose possession of our territorial waters and our fishing stocks. And it doesn't want to lose control of making most of our laws on our behalf. And it wants its borders to remain open, our borders to remain open to all of its citizens. So if we did leave, what would that do? Well, first of all, it might embolden other member states to actually ask for and seek better terms of membership. It might also encourage those member states' dissident political parties to agitate for their nation's exit from the EU and follow our example, and indeed some of them are already going down that road. So why on earth would any sincere and intelligent British politician think that the EU will voluntarily agree to any deal that brings about an advantageous exit for Britain? Such an exit can only be such an exit can only be disadvantageous for the European Union given its current ambitions. There never was going to be a deal. There never is going to be a deal. Now, about 3 years ago, I actually wrote a book entitled The Road to Freedom. There it is. And in this, I set out to explain how we could leave the European Union. Now, at the time, the referendum was just a promise that David Cameron had made, and I doubted very much that it was ever actually happen. I expected him to renege on it. However, much to my surprise, it did happen. And I laid out in the book, actually, before that happened, that if we did win, if the Leave vote won, that this would not go unopposed. Now, I pointed out that under Article 50's 2-year negotiation period, we would see a relentless political guerrilla warfare by our own establishment and the media to undermine, delay and impede our exit. Now, I pointed out also that under Article 50, that process could be delayed beyond the 2-year period because the negotiations can be extended indefinitely by mutual agreement. Now, the danger I pointed out in the book was that our exit could actually be delayed up until the next British general election, when a new parliament could claim that actually they had a fresh mandate and could overturn the decision of the referendum altogether. And I'm sorry to say it, but very much what I laid out is actually been happening since the 23rd of June 2016. Now, David Cameron said that he would enforce the referendum decision, and then, of course, when Remain lost, he promptly resigned. And then, of course, we waited a few weeks until Mrs May was in place, and she didn't actually do anything until March this year, when she finally invoked Article 50, having given the Remainers 9 months to regroup and counter-attack, which is precisely what they did in the courts. It's interesting, isn't it, that every treaty that we've ever entered into in the European Union has been initially done using the royal prerogative, which nobody ever complained about. But suddenly, when we want to do the same thing in reverse, they found this a big affront to democracy. Bearing in mind, of course, that all of that would have been would be giving the EU notice that we were going to quit. And we don't actually leave until the European Communities Act 1972 is repealed anyway. So it didn't actually change anything, but it did give the Remainers the chance to win something of a PR victory. Now, it wasn't until after the summer that David Davis was finally sent off to negotiate with Mr Barnier, who promptly told him that the price of our leaving was going to be €100 billion. Now, Mrs May meekly accepts that as one of the EU's best customers, that we will have to pay them billions of pounds in order for us to keep on buying their products. I don't think Mrs May was ever actually in business, and it shows a little bit with that actually approach to these negotiations. But anyway, Mrs May made a speech, I think it was in January, wasn't it? But she made another speech on the 22nd of September in Florence about her vision of where we're going. What is that exactly? Let me just outline that. She said we're going to leave the European Union on the 29th of March 2019. We're going to pay the EU billions of pounds for the privilege of leaving, but she isn't entirely sure how much that will be yet. We are going to leave the Council, the Commission and the European Parliament. But all EU-derived law will be incorporated into UK law, and we will still remain subject to decisions of the Court of Justice of the European Union to some greater or lesser extent. There was no great ground plan for repealing laws or for taking back control of our territorial waters and fishing ground. However, one thing that she did do, which is very important, which of course our mainstream media hasn't really reported on, is she proposed a new security treaty. Now that treaty will tie us into the EU's military ambitions and its foreign and security policy. Under Mrs May's proposed treaty, we will be part of the EU's emerging European army, its European armed forces. And if you don't believe me, you can read documents that have come out from the European Union recently about its new strategy on this. And in fact, the European Parliament published a booklet recently when I was in Strasbourg. I picked up a copy, which lays out the plan for deeper and complete integration on the military, on finance, on economics, on everything you can possibly think of, all of which we were told weren't going to happen before the referendum. And of course, if we'd have actually voted to remain, they would have taken that as our tacit agreement to be a full partner in all of this deep integration policy, which is now going to be brought to its logical conclusion, if they are successful, which will be a United States of Europe. Now, this treaty that she proposes as well means that we will be continue to be tied to the EU's developing criminal justice system, and we will continue to be bound to its legal institutions and its legal instruments, such as the European arrest warrant. 2 points on that. I was in a committee meeting recently with the representative of the Commission was present, and we were talking about the European Public Prosecutor, which Britain has an opt-out from. And I said to him, can you answer a question for me, please? I've been saying for years that it doesn't matter that we have an opt-out, because the public prosecutor will be able to use the existing legal instruments to actually do what they want through another nation state. So they can circumvent our opt-out. Well, he gave quite a long answer to me, my question, and I have to say that the answer was yes. It will circumvent our opt-out. And it's on my website if anybody wants to see it. So we are going to be sucked into all of these things. Interesting, quite topical, you saw that the Prime Minister of Catalonia has fled to Brussels and has said that he was not going back to face trial in Spain because he doesn't trust the legal system. Well, bad luck, because they've just issued a European arrest warrant for him. He will be going back whether he likes it or not. I've sat in British courts, in an extradition court, where people have argued they shouldn't be sent back because there's no evidence against them. It's a trumped-up charge. They'll be held in a hellhole prison which offends against common standards which we have. We wouldn't allow anybody to be sent off to another foreign country to be held in such a prison. And the judge has said there's nothing I can do about it. I have no power to stop extradition. And if the European country in question has signed the European Convention on Human Rights, I cannot deem them to be in breach of it. And that's why I hate the European arrest warrant so much, because it sacrifices basic freedoms and liberties that we've enjoyed in this country for 7 centuries and were hard won. And of course, we're not going to have this so-called transition period, which will extend from March 2019, mid-March 2019, for an unknown period of time. And indeed, as I've said, it could take us up to or beyond the next general election. Now, Mrs May was a Remainer. She doesn't really want to leave the EU. Most of her senior ministers are Remainers, including the one she's just replaced Mr Fallon with. And a large majority of both houses of Parliament are Remainers. So what does Mrs May really plan? What I think she needs to do is, or she wants to do, is to neutralise the internecine warfare that we've had over the European Union in this country, the political internecine warfare that we've had since we joined. She needs to find a way of neutralising that. I'm sure that she wants to see the demise of the UK Independence Party, because we gave those voters who genuinely want to leave the EU a place to put their vote, a party that they could vote for. And we brought about that referendum through means of our I believe that Mrs May intends to negotiate a withdrawal agreement whereby we leave in name but not in reality. Because we're no longer just going to sit in the council, we're no longer going to sit on the commission, we're not going to have members of the European Parliament, but nothing else very much is going to change. And after a few years, when things have died down a bit, I believe that a Conservative or Labour government can then announce it was all a big mistake and we're going to rejoin. But it doesn't have to be like that. Now, I never said in anything that I've written that it was going to be easy to extricate ourselves from the European Union after 44 years of EU laws that have entangled us like some kind of legislative Japanese knotweed. But unless we do it boldly and decisively, it's never going to happen at all. Now, in my book, The Road to Freedom, I laid down how we could and should leave, and I expanded that, as Barry said, in June this year, into the UKIP EU exit plan, which goes into a lot more detail. But let me describe in summary what should have happened the week after the referendum. It didn't, but even so, it's never too late for it to happen. Parliament should repeal the European Communities Act 1977. The first step in the process, not the last step. Yes. Now that repeal bill would incorporate that all EU-derived law temporarily remains in place. Chaos would not ensue. And indeed, Bill Cash wrote a marvellous draft bill, which I've used as Appendix 1 in my exit plan, which says precisely what I've described. Now, having done that, the government should then go to the European Union and say, well, we just left under our law. We're no longer legally members as far as we're concerned. But don't worry, things are not going to fall apart because all the law stays in place. But we're now going to start to repeal and amend that law in accordance with our priorities and in our timescale. Then, first thing on the agenda, we offer the EU continued tariff-free trade. They can have the freedom of movement of goods, services and capital. They can't have people.
Yeah.
And then we would also reserve the right to negotiate our own trade agreements with the rest of the world. And we would say, there you are, EU, this is Monday morning, we'll come back on Friday and you can tell us what we want to do. If it's unacceptable to you, no problem, because we will go on WTO terms, take it or leave it.
Yes.
Now, regarding the UK citizens in the EU and the EU citizens in the UK, we should actually forget about trying to do a deal with the European Union. We should approach each one of those countries unilaterally and say to them, we would like a reciprocal deal whereby we give the same rights to your citizens in our country if you'll give them to our citizens in your country. And you can imagine that Poland has got 800 to 900,000 people here. We have 30,000 people there. I think they'd agree to that. Most other countries in the EU would. And the reason I say this has to be done unilaterally under our respective immigration policies, our policies and their policies, is because the EU cannot enforce this agreement anyway. If you're a member of the European Parliament, you often get people writing to you because EU law isn't being applied fairly to them, British citizens, when they live in these countries. And then you write to the Commission, and the Commission writes back and says, well, we don't implement the law, that's the nation state. If someone's got a problem, they have to go to the European Court of Justice or the European Court of Human Rights. The EU cannot enforce this policy anyway, even if it agrees to it. Now, and of course we would, under the plan that I'm proposing, withdraw from the Common Agricultural Policy and the Common Fisheries Policy, and we reclaim our territorial waters. What we could do in the meantime is offer fishing licences to certain EU countries for a limited period of time, a few years, until we've actually had time to rebuild our own fishing industry, which is now completely depleted. We cannot possibly hope or expect to negotiate our way out of tens of thousands of pieces of EU legislation in 2 years. It's impossible. You couldn't do it in 10 years. So what we would do, exactly as I said, is prioritise what we're going to repeal and amend, do the big things, and a lot of the other stuff can stay on the back burner. The one thing that always sticks in my mind, I can't get it out of my head, is when we sat in the European Union Parliament and voted on the uniform height of brake lights on farm vehicles. I wish I could forget the brake lights. Somehow I think that is something that we could leave on the back burner and deal with that at some point in the future if we really think they need to be changed. And there's loads of stuff like that, believe me. A lot of this technical stuff, we might decide we're not going to repeal at all because we need it to interact with the European Union, if indeed it still continues to exist. Now, we should make the EU an offer it cannot refuse, not ask it for a deal that it doesn't want to give us. Now, I can tell you how it should be done, and I know there's one big flaw in my argument, one big drawback that I'm fully aware of. We don't have a patriotic Prime Minister, we don't have a patriotic government, we don't have patriotic Houses of Parliament who actually want to do what I described. We're governed by quislings and traitors and they want us to be governed by a foreign power, and they're going to do everything they possibly can to delay, impede, and eventually overturn Brexit if they possibly can. And in that they are aided and abetted very ably by you, or it means nothing at all. Thank you.